what you see in front of you is the microphone, the headphone, and the sound shield.
Okay.
And the maximum number of people you can invite to create content with you are 2 people.
Okay.
So we can't add an additional microphone, sound shield, or anything like that. And when you want to be touching the microphone, I will ask you to touch the frame and not the microphone itself. So
What do you
this
mean
is
the frame?
This is the
Oh,
frame.
okay.
You want to be touching that to
Oh,
adjust
okay.
instead of the mic itself. So the first thing that you are going to do is to connect the headphone and the microphone to the sound system, which is the red thing over here.
Budaya di Harvard. Bikin norma kelas.
As an international student myself, I also enjoy it when we hear diverse perspective, but at the same time, one thing that we discussed is to make sure it's a dialogue that adds value to the conversation or the point, instead of sharing for the sake of sharing, so that we use our time more efficiently. And I hope that we can come to an agreement about that.
So how would you amend this particular phrase?
Pertama kali latihan bikin kebijakan publik untuk pendidikan.
Now, the second benefit to this is that screening has been proven by different study that it offers better quality assurance for teachers. In this data from DC Public Schools in 2018,
Kita diminta merekomendasikan kebijakan untuk proses memperkerjakan guru.
that screening scores index shows the strongest predictor of a teacher's job performance, and this number is statistically significant. Another evidence that shows this is in schools in Mexico.
Kamu tim yang mana? 1. Boleh mempekerjakan guru dengan syarat masa percobaan 2 tahun. Kalau oke baru boleh jadi guru tetap. 2. Nggak perlu masa percobaan untuk jadi guru tetap, asal mereka diseleksi berdasarkan ujian yang komprehensif.
Cognitive skills, knowledge of the teaching subject, mastery of pedagogy and ethics. It shows that it can improve students' outcome or performance.
Ditantang dosen buat desain pengalaman belajar untuk ningkatin skill nyetir mobil.
And then once you reach a certain level, then you can move on to the next part, which is the driving simulation or driving simulator.
Kita cuma dikasih 30 menit untuk merangkai pengalaman belajarnya.
Actually learning the experience of driving, because the simulator will also provide you with the blinkers, with the mirrors, will provide you with the windshield. So it asks you to drive in learning environments, such as try driving in the rain, try driving in the snow.
Terus kita dikasih 3 menit untuk presentasi.
And then at the end, the goal is for you to know how to drive in different situations.
This class is called T127, Teaching and Learning Lab Practicum.
Gugup gak sih waktu kasih pendapat di kelas? Jujur iya banget.
Kind of just sharing my personal experience, because I recently did an interview with a school in California, and one of the first questions that they asked was, do you have a community here? Because you're an international student.
Ini tips dari aku. 1. Rangkai dulu apa yang mau kamu sampaikan di kertas atau dalam hati. 2. Percaya bahwa semua yang ambil matkul tersebut tertarik dengan ilmu yang bisa kamu sampaikan selama relevan dengan topiknya. 3. Yakin bahwa nanti juga pasti udah pada lupa, jadi gak perlu khawatir dianggap gimana-gimana. Dan terakhir, latihan sampai terbiasa.
You got this!
Kind of just sharing my personal experience, because I recently did an interview with a school in California, and one of the first questions that they asked was, do you have a community here? Because you're an international student. And that was an interesting question that I didn't think was going to get asked, but that made me wonder if that's because they're also concerned about mental health well-being and making sure that it doesn't impact the students that I'm going to be working with. And so this, I think, when it came up on whether or not you come from that area and whether you have roots, I think make a lot more sense now that I've had that conversation with the head of school.
Yeah, they could be very thoughtful in the way that you proposed about the influence of your own happiness on.
I guess also having that willingness of knowing when to build and when to test. Like once you're done with testing, I feel like it requires further development or further building, and that's what continuous means, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, knowing when to expand versus digging, digging more. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, knowing when to explore breadth and knowing when to explore depth. If that makes sense. Okay.
That's something I had a question on, like when we were doing the reading. Yeah. It's like I took a course with Monica Higgins, and we talked about like when to scale versus not to scale. So
Hi everyone, my name is Zafira, and I know that that's not what's written in my card, but my 2023 resolution is to actually use the name that my parents gave me instead of a nickname. So please call me that. If you're used to calling me Za, we can switch that. I'm from Indonesia. I go by the She series, and my one hobby that I want to get better at is figure skating. So that's my long-term goal, is to live near a rink in the future.
Konsultasi karir dengan dosen di kampus.
And I'm really interested in this idea of data assessment and trying to figure out how to develop or design improvement based off of that. And I did look into the projects that T127 is doing, and a lot of them look great. And I think already set my heart on at least one project. But outside of T127, I wanted to do something that's more data intensive and data heavy. And that was when I reached out to Maho and asked if there is any opportunity in Harvard for me to participate in that type of project and gain experience from practice rather than from learning.
Cara dosen di Harvard memfasilitasi diskusi.
Even if you as a leader may think it would be helpful for the system, if there is a working culture in your team, then maybe system can be bottom up instead of top down.
It's interesting because I think it could be argued that a leader may need to introduce a new tool, right? Do you have any thoughts about how you might have done this differently to encourage more of that bottom-up support?
I think one thing that we tried is professional development or mentoring. Let's do a Slack workshop, which we tried to do. But because it wasn't ingrained in the culture of working in Indonesia, where I'm from, it takes a longer time to get work done than if we're using a WhatsApp group chat. And then every time we bring in new people, we have to teach them again, and we have to teach them again. And we decided that for the sake of efficiency, we can forget about Slack and keep using what works for all of us.
So in this case, because it already worked, you actually didn't have a real need to introduce this, to have this change.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important point, that sometimes we introduce changes into systems when there's no real urgency or need.
Kalau kamu punya pertanyaan di kelas, coba deh tanyain aja.
Shows you this result that a certain number of students or a certain percentage of students does go to college and enroll to college. By one implementation, can you make the conclusion that PACE does increase college enrollment, or is it something that you have to do over and over again several times before you can finally say that?
Karena kemungkinannya teman kita punya pertanyaan yang sama.
Just related to that, like, can you parse out like which strategies within this were most effective? And like to Za's point, like how can, you know, like with the through line, but also like in looking at impact, are you also looking at what had the biggest, like what led to the biggest change?
Working as a teaching assistant at Harvard Innovation Labs.
Students that I have trained, so your best bet is to follow through, but most of the times the need to use a camera is to record yourself and not connecting it to your computer. And so I'm afraid that's something that you're gonna have to figure out.
I get paid $25 per hour and work 5 hours per week.
But if you want to improve the camera quality, I can suggest that you use lightings, because there are some lightings that you see in front of you. There are the blue square box.
It's a fun way to meet other Harvard students.
How I deliver my argument in class.
observation
1.
has indeed shown evidence
State
that
your
it can improve
main
teachers'
argument.
performance. So I believe peer observation must be implemented in English secondary schools. However, I disagree that peer observation is to be implemented in the ways that are proposed by Larson for 3 reasons. And
2.
so let's say we conduct
Clearly
2 to
state
3
your supporting
observations per
argument.
year, and first, it is more costly to hire a full-time evaluator than to assign teachers as observer. The second argument is peer evaluation is more effective when the observer role is given to all teachers instead of just 1 or 2. And my final argument is that peer observation has evidence of improving teacher skills and then consequently student test scores when observers can implement their acquired learning in the classroom.
3.
Then that's probably
Bring
gonna cost
evidence.
each school. A different study mentioned that hiring a full-time evaluator can cost you $7,500. This study has shown that this worked because every teacher were interacting with the rubric.
4.
limits that impact
Restate your argument.
So I reiterate that the Department of Education will benefit more if peer observation is implemented in a school-wide approach methods similar to the study than that of Larson's proposal.
Yes, you can start.
The first word that I put was developed. And just saying more to that, my specific area of interest is sexuality education. And when I say that, I've previously mentioned that a lot of the curriculum that we have is originated from the global north. And not to say that they're bad, like they're really good, they're really well developed, and there are so many good examples of it being implemented in a classroom where you don't see that in a country like Indonesia or Japan. And so when I did my thesis, when I was an undergraduate, I looked into a lot of these practices and contents that I derived from UNESCO, for example, or relationships and sexuality education from the UK. And you can't help but to do that because that is where you have a starting point. Well, what I did with my research is to synthesize those contents with what I think can be more applicable to my context. So it's a good starting point because it's more developed.
Okay, so something being more developed offers a starting point to build, as opposed to like imagining every country starting from scratch.
Okay, so we made a pie.
I know.
Because there was a 2D pie, not a 3D one. We knew that this was gonna spark some controversy, but you can easily see this in a pie as you can see it in a bar graph.
We felt like in the bar graph, the point was like that spicy little caption that was like people that aren't certified, but that can't be visual because it was just a caption. So in a bar or a pie, it wouldn't show that. So we thought this would work.
And it also emphasizes that there are more advanced professionals than the standard professional teachers, and it also highlights how there's no unqualified teachers in the school.
I will agree that this is an acceptable use of a pie chart, one of the very few limiting cases, so thank you for sharing it. And for your bravery. After I just said don't use pie charts, you're like, all right, I'm doing a pie chart.
So support for behavioral issues.
Yeah, I think if you're a new teacher, it's a lot harder to find your own way when you're on the behavioral side of things, if you're struggling with that and you're not getting support. But if you have a classroom where you feel like you're in control and you feel like you're building good relationships with the kids, if you're struggling with like teaching and like getting results, like there's a lot more out there for you to like.
Your first year teaching is going to be crushing.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm prepared for that.
Like really not very good.
That's okay. Like I think there's always going to be a learning curve in any new job that you take on.
Teaching learning curves like
just like that. I guess so elementary school if I have a good support.
What do I do when I don't understand a class material?
I was wondering if there is going to be a workshop or a section where we talk about the skills assignment, because I personally found the previous skill assignment to be quite challenging, and I was hoping we could talk about how to do them.
I tell my professor and ask for support.
Ketika aku pertama kali akhirnya memutuskan aku pengen kuliah di Jepang, aku langsung cari-cari. Yang pertama adalah universitasnya di mana. dengan jurusan yang aku mau. Karena kan gak semua universitas punya jurusan yang aku cari. Dan jurusan yang aku cari pun waktu itu sebenarnya gak saklek sih harus satu program yang spesifik. Tapi selagi aku bisa belajar apa yang ingin aku pelajari dan bisa membawa aku ke tempat yang aku inginkan, maka aku gak ada di satu program yang sama pun gak apa-apa. Contoh, aku daftar Human Sciences di Osaka University, tapi aku daftar International Relations di Tsukuba University, aku daftar Business and Economics di Nagoya University. Ini masih masuk satu ranah yang aku semua tertarik. Aku buka semua websitenya, aku buka persyaratannya, dan waktu itu ketika aku cari-cari info pun belum buka ya application-nya. Tapi untuk yang tahun sebelumnya masih ada sisa-sisa informasi, jadi aku did my research based on those information. Aku cari syaratnya yang salah satu dituliskan adalah essay, IELTS, terus rekomendasi, terus nilai rapot, sertifikat, portofolio, semua ditranslate bahasa Inggris. Ini adalah informasi yang semuanya bisa kita cari dengan sendirinya sebenarnya teman-teman. Jadi walaupun kita nggak punya guru BK yang tahu menau tentang informasi kuliah ke luar negeri, kan kalau kita udah SMA, kita sebenarnya udah bisa ya riset sendiri. Kita udah belajar cara nulis kartul, kita udah bisa menggunakan teknologi yang namanya Google dan sekedar cari jurusan HI di Jepang atau International Relations in Japan Undergraduate. Masukin aja keyword-keyword seperti itu, banyak gunakan waktu untuk mencari informasi.
Because of exactly what she said, and because it's the imperative. It's like, wow, we've got to really focus on this. This is a huge problem across the nation, and look what's happening.
I think the final version is stronger, and mostly because like the vocabulary is just a lot more clear. It's saying like very instead of like unaware of the nuances and the actual magnitude.
But it's all based on more investment and more funding to our communities essentially. So I feel like that is in itself a very sort of progressive argument to make, kind of straight up.
We all tend to participate in classroom discussion. Specialized teacher versus multitasking teacher.
If a teacher is to multitask or not specialized, then they're teaching one specific classroom and only that classroom, so they also have that ability to personalize since they can get to know the students better. Whereas with specialization, you only teach one subject, but you teach it to so many students, so it's hard to form that connection with students and personalize to their needs.
Do you agree? Please share your thoughts.
Dear guests and friends, if I ask you to name this body anatomy, what would you call it? Now, instinctively in the back of your mind, you might think, oh, it's a vagina, because that is what we commonly know it as. When in fact, and I know you know this, it's called the vulva. Now, this is a small example of how limited our knowledge can be when it comes to our own sexual rights and reproductive health, and this goes back to a lack of conversations that we've had about this with maybe our own family or back when we were in school.
Guests and friends, if you can take a look at the slide just a little bit, thank you. So, if I ask you to name this anatomy, what would you call it? Now, in the back of your mind, instinctively, you might think, oh, it's a vagina, because that is what we commonly call it as. When in fact, and I know you know this, it's called the vulva. And this is just a small example of how limited our knowledge can be concerning our own reproductive health and sexual rights, because we don't really have that conversation when we were younger, whether it was in school or with our family or parents. Now, Know Better is a nonprofit that aims to tackle this issue by offering culturally responsive sex ed workshop for Indonesian parents. Now, why, you might think? Well, sex ed because there is a strong taboo in the Indonesian culture concerning sexual rights and reproductive health. Growing up as a young girl in Indonesia, I remember one time going to the store with my mom and I picked up a very colorful box from the counter and I asked her if I could have it because I thought it was candy. And later on, my mom stared at it long and hard and then returned it to the counter and said, ask your dad. Later on, I realized it was a box of condoms. From that experience, I took the hint that I wasn't able to approach my parents concerning these topics, and it's really unfortunate because as a kid, you need to have that language and ability to communicate about your own body as soon as possible. However, in a conservative community like Indonesia, before you educate the kids, you first have to educate the parents. And that's where Know Better hopes to come in. Now, fortunately, In Indonesia, the government is trying to uphold similar missions. They recently passed these bills, which in summary, they're trying to eliminate sexual violence happening in the community. And one way to do that is by implementing sex ed in school. It's not revolutionary because sex ed has been compulsory since 2013 in Indonesia. However, schools are reluctant in teaching it because of fear of backlash from parents. Now, another reason for that fear of backlash from parents is because parents also feel uncomfortable considering globally recognized sex ed curricula is Eurocentric and need adjustment to fit in the Indonesian context. So we know here that the root of the cause of the problem are parents. And so to tackle that, we're trying to offer online and offline sex ed workshops to empower them so that they could talk about sex with their kids. And we are offering online and offline workshops because we want to offer flexibility due to parents' busy schedule. We're starting with parents with kids from 3 to 7 because studies have shown that we need to start as early as possible. However, we're going to develop this as we go on in an age-appropriate manner. And also personalized module or customized module in the beginning so that we can also be informed to what parents consider culturally appropriate or what they feel comfortable with considering the ethnic groups and the faith group diversity in Indonesia. Our B2C approach is by reaching out to parents through Facebook and Instagram, and this is based on the most used social media platforms among users in Indonesia as of 2022. So Facebook and Instagram is our main use of advertising. However, for customer communication, we will be using WhatsApp because this is the most downloaded app for messaging. Now for B2C, we are charging $10 per person, which is a competitive pricing considering the household income in Indonesia, and we will be offering referral discount. We will also be working with schools to have workshops with parents and PTA, and in the case that they offer large bookings at once, we will be offering freemium models such as free trial and additional classes for free. The market size potential is $20 million. And for our first year revenue projection, we are hoping to get approximately $66,000 or $63,000 if we take out the COGS, and it will increase as we go on to develop the product. And so with this pitch, now you know that the vagina is actually a vulva. Now you know better about our mission, and there are ways that you can help us, which is by offering the grants that we need, which is amounting to 240 million Indonesian rupiah. Now you might think this is a large number, but this is Indonesia. The dollar is very strong there. So it's only $15,000. So if everyone here give us $300 in that spreadsheet right now, it'll be in total $15,000. So now you know how it takes to help.
Reminders for this week, so please be sure to check out on that. So the first email you'll be getting is today, which will have a pre-simulation survey, and we'd be really happy and would appreciate it if you can finish that by noon tomorrow. Yeah, so I think earlier you mentioned how given the result of this graph, then we could maybe argue that teaching to the test can give positive results to the scores. So does that mean, are you saying that for those schools that were performing well, that was in the cusp of being recognized, they were not asked to be evaluated because there was an assumption that they were already doing well, therefore they don't have to be evaluated, and therefore the teachers weren't pressured to perform better in class?
So there are two things there. The first question was is it something about teaching to the test that helps kids do better later on?
I'm still on research, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
One quote that I read in the guidebook is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. But at the same time, recently I've read something that I feel more strongly on, which is don't ask for a seat on the table, but build your own. And I feel like in research that's really relevant because you don't want to get a seat only to have your opinions or thoughts distorted into the agenda of whoever's inviting you to that table. And so I feel like it's important to also build your own table where you can really design your research, your methodology to really benefit the community that you're serving.
Yeah, I should put that under both because I think both groups could really think about what is the role I want to play?
I chose proposal 2, but one question that I did have is how has the evaluation system worked in the past? Because I think having that information would help me have a stronger argument as to why maybe we should continue with the TES, so how it has impacted the student population, but we didn't have that information, and based on what was available, I was pushed more strongly towards proposal number 2.
Which would keep the...
Yeah.
This semester has been the best semester of this course.
Aww.
Whenever it's been, 7 years now, 7 semesters. But I sincerely am going to miss coming to this and talking with this group. So
Aww.
thank you.
Thank you.
Great semester. It's been a great example of peer effects and how like this, any class is about the people in the room, not just the one person. And the last thing to say is, second to last thing to say is please fill out your course evaluation. Like if I can be helpful to you in any other way in your future careers, please don't hesitate to send me an email. You could also call.
One big takeaway for me is to use the success factors when you're explaining your data, and always try to follow up with actionable plans after you deliver and showcase those data, so you don't leave the audience thinking, so what? Halo, aku Zafira dari Graduate School of Education. Also 2 questions. Yang pertama adalah, when you're talking about learning ecosystem, selain dari public sector kan kita ada private sector juga. Kayak misalnya yang ngerjain sekolahmu, yang ngerjain pijar dan lain sebagainya, yang memang bergerak di bidang tech juga. So how do you collaborate with these stakeholders without while ensuring that you're not stepping on one another's toes? Dan yang kedua adalah, who decides what goes in the curriculum Merdeka app? So for example, I founded a social enterprise that works on sexuality education for Indonesia. So if I want my curriculum to go on that app, how do I go about it?
First one is, I wonder if you did end up pursuing internship during your time in Hosea. If not, what was your consideration? And if yes, what was your experience like? And the second one is, if you have any experience with cross-registration. I spoke to an SGS student yesterday who said that you really have to make your case to apply to HBS classes, for example. So I also want to know what your experiences with that is like, and how early you have to consider making cases to apply to these classes. Thank you.
Right now, outside of this course anyway, I'm already doing the same work. The difference is the work that I'm doing is specific to the Indonesian context. I was hoping to bring this into a lot more global context, and so I am fully intending to work on this the same way that I would work on my project, which is kind of really with the goal of getting a funding at the end, like actually pitching to investors. So that's how I feel about this right now. One of my questions is that outside of T127, I'm really interested in this idea of data assessment and trying to figure out how to develop or design improvement based off of that. And I did look into the projects that T127 is doing, and a lot of them look great. And I think already set my heart on at least one project, but outside of T127, I wanted to do something that's more data intensive and data heavy, and that was when I reached out to Maho and asked if there is any opportunity in Harvard for me to participate in that type of project and gain experience from practice rather than from learning.